Fulton County District Attorney Paul Howard joins me now. Thank you so much for joining us. I know how busy you must be. First of all, has Officer Rolfe turned himself in? He is the officer that you have charged with murder, first-degree murder.
To this point, he has not turned himself in. We've not received information that he has turned himself in. We know that Brosnan has, but we're still waiting on Officer Rolfe.
Can you clarify a dispute that has arisen in the last 24 hours between the attorneys for Officer Brosnan and your initial statement as to whether or not he is a cooperating state's witness? They say that his lawyers say he's cooperating and giving his story, but that he's not, quote, a state's witness.
Andrea, let me tell you, that's really just, that whole discussion is subterfuge away from the real important issues in this case. I will just say that we stick by our comments made on yesterday, but I'm hoping people will turn back to the crux of this issue. And the crux of this issue is that Mr. Brooks is dead for really no valid reason at all.
There's a lot of visual evidence, obviously. Many people, including the mayor from her comments last night, were not aware of those still photos showing one officer kicking, Officer Rolfe kicking Mr. Brooks and, Officer Brosnan standing on him. Tell me your reactions and how important that was, as well as the shot that was fired into another car with 3 witnesses.
Well, my staff and I all probably had visceral reactions when we saw the videotape, the surveillance tape showing the kick and showing Officer Brosnan standing on the body of Mr. Brooks. I could not imagine a circumstance that would illustrate a more total lack of respect for him and for what he represented. But you also got to consider, not only were they disrespecting Mr. Brooks, this action took place in an open parking lot at a restaurant where people were out filming them, and the officers, apparently, that did not mean anything to them. The shot that was fired into the car of the gentleman who was visiting from Memphis, it just shows how this situation had really gotten out of control and how reckless it was to fire that weapon at a restaurant parking lot, not being able to control where the projectiles would end up. And as one of the those witnesses said on yesterday, it's really fortunate that we're not talking about an additional death other than Mr. Brooks.
Do you have any concern that you may have overcharged Officer Rolfe, given how hard it is to convict a police officer and how much visual evidence there is that there was at least a struggle before Mr. Brooks ran away and was clearly shot in the back?
No, we have made a careful examination of the evidence. And in this case, because we've had the opportunity to review 8 separate videos or video surveillance incidents of what happened, I'm not concerned about being overcharged. And also, this marks, I believe, about the 39th or 40th police case that we've prosecuted. This marks the 9th time that we have been involved in a police shooting that resulted in someone's death. And so we've charged a felony murder before. It has not been problematic. So I'm not really concerned about overcharging.
Now, you presented in your case, when you made your presentation yesterday, that the laser was no longer functional after it had been fired twice. Do you understand how this got so out of control, where for 41 minutes there was what visually seemed to be a very normal conversation, a cooperative person Do you know how it got to the point where Mr. Brooks was shot in the back?
Well, when you watch the incident, as we've talked about the 41 minutes, it's a very informal, casual, almost a jovial conversation. But at the end of that 41 minutes, the officer, based upon his own department's regulations, was supposed to inform Mr. Brooks that they were arresting him for a DUI. The officer did not do that immediately as the regulation required, but what he did was he moved to the rear of Mr. Brooks and he attempted to restrain him. So when he did that, you could see Mr. Brooks react, and his reaction was to start running. So an incident that had been calm up until that exchange then turned into something that we all know now has progressed to the shooting of Mr. Brooks.
I'm going to be speaking to the House Speaker in a moment. How important is it, do you think, that there be a national standard for the use of force, given what has happened repeatedly with this kind of issue, with the police using force against minority communities, principally black communities?
Well, Andrea, I believe that we really need to stop playing around with this issue. I really believe that's what we've been doing in this country. We've been just talking about it. We're really not serious yet, because when we are serious, I think that what we're going to do is we are going to form a national, independent, new department in the federal government that will do 4 different things. One of those things is to collect data. The second thing that they would do is to create standards and training. The third thing I think they ought to do is to reward communities and police departments who de-escalate situations. And the fourth thing this national agency should do is to create a place where citizens can complain and get cases prosecuted. I don't think we're going to see any real significant reductions until we put together this agency, because that agency will send a signal to communities that finally we are serious about this problem. Because right now people don't think that our country is serious about solving this problem. We just keep talking about it.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.